Hello and good afternoon, everyone. I would like to thank you all for joining the show on today. We have a very special guest, a close friend of mine. I've been knowing him since the 5th grade, baby.
5th grade.
5th grade. And we will be discussing some things that may be life-changing, epiphanies for some. But before we get started, we want to dive into introducing Mr. T. Henderson. Thank you for actually taking the time out to join in on what we're doing here to create one brain and to better everyone from a health and wealth perspective.
Absolutely, man. Pleased to be here.
Well, thank you. And tell me just a little bit about yourself.
So I've been in science for almost 20 years now. I've worked in everything from evolutionary genetics to neuroscience and toxicology.
Nice.
So I've run the gamut. That includes cancer as well. So I'm pretty much adept in any type of scientific field except for clinical settings. I haven't worked in the clinical hospital setting just yet, but I've worked in government, I worked in university, and I've also worked in private biopharma.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's pretty awesome. Now, what we're going to do here is because the main objective for this video is to raise some awareness, misconceptions. We do want to give a disclaimer that the information we're discussing is from a perspective and knowledge of Mr. T. Henderson, his level and area of expertise. Some of the experiences person to person are through research to better our understanding on how to protect ourselves, how to protect each other, and how to be able to function in a society where things are constantly changing. And with that stated, one of the topics we wanted to begin with was the understanding of viruses, the understanding of the immune system, and ways to protect yourself. So the first question I wanted to review with you is your thought process behind people nowadays that are refusing to wear masks or have their own biased opinion according to what's going on in society. Just break down a little bit of what you're seeing and the theories from fact.
Okay. So the whole mask thing, I think people get it a little misconstrued, right? So the mask is not to protect you. It's to protect vulnerable populations within the community, right? So people with compromised immune systems, people with pre-existing conditions. So the mask is actually a selfless act that you're performing in the service of society. It has nothing to do with political affiliation. It has nothing to do with trying to control you or trying to take away any of your rights. It's more of us trying to protect each other in a public health crisis, right? Because if we don't look out for each other, then who's going to look out for us?
It's kind of interesting that you say that. And what I mean by kind of interesting is that, this concept of love your neighbor as you love yourself.
Absolutely.
And in order to love your neighbor, you have to understand how to love yourself.
Correct.
So by protecting yourself for the sake of your neighbor is doing the same. And then we're creating an environment where we can contain this thing.
Absolutely.
Until we get a full understanding of it.
Absolutely.
Which brings me to this next theory where people believe they have super immune systems. They're like superheroes and, my generation came from this sort of DNA, so it's impossible for me to catch COVID or certain viruses. And surprising enough, some of these people, rest their souls, have passed away because they have refused to embrace or accept. So in stating that, I was wondering if you can kind of give us a breakdown on the immune system and what little we know about how the immune system operates.
Well, we've been researching, the scientific community has been researching the immune system for close to over 40, 50 years, right? And we're still constantly learning all these new things about the immune system and how the immune system helps and aids in our health, right? In our overall health, right? Your immune system is your defense against the outside world. So we have this thing called the hygiene problem, right? Where in developed nations, we develop autoimmune diseases, but in third world countries, they hardly ever develop autoimmune diseases.
Right.
Why is that the case? Well, in the third world countries, their immune systems are always being challenged. Cholera, bacteria, all these different things. So their immune system doesn't have the time to develop autoimmune diseases.
Right.
But in a more hygienic environment, well, your immune system is fired up and your immune system is ready to fight for something. And so they see your own natural cells or your own natural material, your own DNA, as invaders, and that's why you get an immune system, and that's why you get autoimmune diseases.
Right. And to those out there, just a disclaimer: we're not saying don't wash your ass. in order to build your immune system.
Well, it's more like, please allow your kids to play in the dirt, because when they're playing in the dirt, they're actually introducing a lot of different toxins, a lot of different foreign invaders into their system,
right?
And that makes them stronger. And in fact, there were studies done that when kids are raised with animals, they have less autoimmune diseases.
And possibly being exposed to bacteria, whereas the body is able to say, okay, let me see if I can figure out XYZ for this. And then the immune system is creating remedies. It's almost like random cards that are being flipped.
Right. So your immune system has a library of what are called antibodies, right? And so once a foreign invader is introduced into your body, your immune system is called innate immunity, right? So they go right out and try to kill it, right? And so once they kill it, they'll bring it back into your cells, disassociate it, and then create antibodies. So the next time you see that invader, because you're constantly, your immune system is constantly being challenged, every day, every day. And so once you see that old invader, you have antibodies, and you won't even know that you were even introduced to it.
Got it. Now, you had explained something to me a while back in regards to the pancreas and its job, and I wanted you to elaborate a little bit more, explain that to the audience in regards to how the pancreas works when it comes to coming up or developing something to attack that foreign object or foreign virus that's in the system. If you can kind of break that down to them the way you broke it down to me, I thought that was very interesting.
Just ask my papa, I know I'm awesome, I'm on it. When it comes to my swag, I don't...
Wait a minute, what I say?
Wait a minute, how many drinks in was I?
Speaking of which, salud. That's pretty good, T.
Your pancreas and your spleen cells operate in the same way, right? So you get the foreign invader. Your spleen cells then produce what's called antibodies to it, right? Well, they're called B cells, really.
Right.
And so these B cells then code for the antibodies, right? And then they start to secrete the antibodies to attack the foreign invader that's invading your body. Right. And so that's how your pancreas and your spleen work in conjunction to make that happen.
So, and I'll break this down in hood language because this is how I have to get it. No, and I'm saying like from a perspective, I think when you at first told me, I said, so it's almost like the cells see this object, they go to the pancreas, they go get the right weapons for war, they come back and they try to go and fight against it to coat that particular virus or that thing attacking the body, and then it disposes of it. The unique thing about COVID and the way it tries to go and attack, coat that, and get rid of it is...
Well, it's not unique. There's a lot we don't know about COVID, but the way the COVID kind of we think
works. And again, this is there is
still we're still doing research on it. Well, I'm not, but the general scientific community is. The way it works is that it's lighting up just about every immune cell in your body, and so your whole body is going through this whole immune response, and that's not a natural thing. And so that's why you lose your smell. Why I was just talking to somebody about this today. That's why you lose your sense of smell first. So they have 6 subcategories of the symptoms, right? And each one, the consistent symptom is loss of smell and taste. So you could have a fever or you could not. You could be asymptomatic or you could not. But each in one of those 6 is always loss of taste and smell first,
right?
Because the COVID is somehow damaging those nerve endings.
Oh wow!
See, and so it's lighting up all these different things inside your body.
And what it's constantly evolving, I think, is the bigger problem as well.
Well, it's mutating.
Well, thank you. So let's clarify evolving versus mutating. And thank you, because that's a misconception. And that's why I'm glad we're having this conversation, because for the average person like myself, we are left to the mercy of social media, news outlets, rumors, false posts on social media that people like to share, aka fake news. And I'm glad that we're able to kind of get some clarification on this, because a lot of people will try to preach something that they saw online that
Right.
does not correlate with bettering yourself or preventing you from catching COVID.
Correct. And so the thing about it is, so it was, well, now it's like 2 strains, right?
Mhm.
So first, the strain was from China, right? And so
Right.
that's the strain that was introduced to the Bay Area back in March, right?
Right.
And so we went shelter in place and all that. But then you had another strain that came from Europe, right? Remember?
Yeah, but I didn't know it was 2 separate strains. Okay, school us.
So you had another strain that came from Europe, right?
Mhm.
But it might have still came from China. We don't know.
Right.
So, but there is a European strain, and that the strain that came from Europe is the strain that infected New York, and that's the current strain that's currently spreading across the country.
Wow.
You see, and so the China strain wasn't. I wouldn't say it wasn't as deadly because it kind of probably was. It's really hard to know right now because of all the manipulation that's going on with the statistics and data and everything and the reporting with the CDC. So we don't actually have foundational numbers about the actual mortality rates opposed with the 2 different strains now. Back in March, the numbers were a little bit more accurate because the reporting was a little bit more, stable.
Right.
Right now, because the reporting numbers are such all over the place, we're just kind of guessing.
Right.
And it's not a bad thing to guess. It's just we just want to make sure that people are as protected as possible because 2 things can happen when a virus decides to mutate.
Mhm.
Either it becomes more virulent, but less deadly, or it can be opposite way. It could be less virulent, but more toxic,
deadly.
more deadly. You see what I mean? And so, or it could just mutate itself right out of existence.
Right. It's kind of like SARS, if I remember correctly.
Well, I'm not sure what happened with SARS.
So Dr. Fauci was saying, and I'm paraphrasing. He was basically saying, without saying, that by the time they actually came up with something to fight SARS, but by the time they came up with something they thought might work, SARS just disappeared.
Right.
It just kind of went away, and that's what I think people are assuming is going to happen with COVID.
Yeah, that's not happening.
No, it's not. And to your point, the fact that there's 2 different strains, I think it's even more important for protection. So, and this is just my theory, and I'm not a scientist, but that means it's possible someone can catch it twice, depending on the strain that you have.
Funny enough, you said that. We just had a confirmed case of that.
Wow.
We just had a confirmed case of a reinfection. Right? And so, it's the same thing with HIV, right?
Yeah.
HIV is the same thing. There's 2 different strains of HIV. There's HIV-1 and HIV-2.
Okay, so let's talk about that.
Well, HIV is different.
Well, no, I'm meaning 2 different strains and how it could be the same thing, yet different strains. Is it one attacks a certain way versus the other? Is one more aggressive than the other?
Well, that's the thing. Each different virus has its own characteristics, and once it mutates, it takes on its own different characteristics, right? And so, I work with a certain organism, right? And so it's all the same organism, but they have different targets within the same cell.
Wow.
So one subtype of the typical organism attacks one aspect of the cell, and then you go to a different subtype, and that attacks a whole different target within the cell. Okay. So viruses work in the same way.
And when you include the different factors in people's individual DNA, genetic codes, and how it can impact them, this is where you're playing a role in the dice game. Where if you go out and say, I feel like I won't catch it, but you could be asymptomatic and you could expose it to those that may have different genetic makeups where what didn't impact you can seriously impact the next person. Right. And it's not necessarily the elder in a sense.
Right. It's not necessarily your genetic code, it's your health status, right? So remember I was talking to you about comorbidity?
Yes.
So comorbidity is about having a pre-existing condition, but then it also being introduced to COVID. So COVID so if you look at the numbers, and this is just released not too long ago, 94% of the people who have passed away from COVID already had a pre-existing condition.
Yeah.
And so why it's so deadly to us in the African American community is a lot of us have pre-existing conditions, right?
Yeah.
There's obesity, there's diabetes, there's high blood pressure, you name it, we pretty much had it, right?
Yeah.
And that happens because we have a lack of access to healthcare, or a general distrust of the medical community, given all the experiments they used to have. We used to be experimented on in the medical community. So African Americans have a deep distrust of the medical community. And so in turn, that's why that's happening. And so now that it's spreading throughout the South, that can be a very damaging thing for us as African Americans.
And that now brings up a different segment or aspect. African Americans, it's been known in history that we've been experimented on, and we have this big distrust for, what doctors may suggest. So now this brings in the key thing of a lot of people are saying they're not going to get the vaccine because they don't trust the government. Right. They believe this is another experiment and they're testing it on African Americans first.
Right.
But then in the flip of that, if we are known to have pre-existing conditions, especially in minorities, for an example, lupus. When my wife was first diagnosed with lupus, they said it's basically a dominant characteristic in minorities. Most minority women are more subject to having lupus.
That's very
a
true.
lot of them, it's dormant. They said a lot of them may have it and don't understand the symptoms that they're having are symptoms from lupus.
And lupus is an autoimmune disease.
So when you incorporate COVID, that's when it becomes deadly.
Yes.
What would you say to the person that says that they're going to take zinc and they're going to do this and they exercise? Does exercising or taking a bunch of zinc mean that you're healthy?
Exercise does, take a bunch of zinc won't. But the reason why exercise and eating healthy and eating clean works is because all those things, exercise, boosts your immune system, eating healthy and clean boosts your immune system. Anything you can do at this point to help your immune system stay strong and robust is actually a good thing. But taking vitamins and things like that, I mean, you can. You just have really expensive pee. Because it's better to get your nutrients from the actual food, right? Because think about it, right? If you, I explain it in this way. So you have a bucket of water, right? And you're trying to transfer that bucket of water into a smaller bucket.
Right.
If you just take that bucket of water and just dump it into that little bucket, some of the water will get in there, but most of the water is spill out.
Yeah.
But if you actually just pour that water into that bucket, all that water will go into that little small bucket.
Right.
And so food is actually a delivery system for vitamins. And people never think about it that way. But it actually is. And so when you're actually going through your natural course of digestion, that's what your body is doing. Your body is just separating out all the nutrients that you need in order to sustain your life.
Got it.
But when you take vitamins, that's like you just throw like all this vitamin C at you. You're going to excrete most of that. Your body will take what it needs, and then you excrete all the rest of it.
Okay, so, and I'm glad you go into that because another thing that I'm noticing with the whole virus and with COVID is that a lot of people are feeling like, well, I can get sick from it and I'll recover from it. For an example, Kaiser, when you call their line, the automated service says if you have COVID, you're more than likely going to recover on your own. Just stay home, quarantine yourself.
Right.
So a lot of people are taking this as, oh, it's not a big deal. If Kaiser's telling me that I can recover from it at home, I wanted to kind of touch on the dangers of assuming that life is back to normal because I believe a lot of people are thinking life is back to normal. We're going into the winter time. We're going into a time period where the immune system is really compromised. We're dealing with weather conditions, spreading of colds and other viruses that can break down the immune system. And then when you incorporate COVID with, let's say, having the flu, to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, that's almost similar to having a compromised immune system.
Absolutely, you're absolutely right. And so that's why they're encouraging people in this fall, get your flu shot. As soon as it's available, get it, right? Because that's the last thing. Can you imagine? You have the flu, and then you have COVID on top of that? Remember, I was supposed to come to your birthday party, and I had the flu, and I couldn't get up. Right? I was on the couch that entire week, right? And so imagine having a flu like that, and then on top of that with COVID, you'll be lucky if you even survive. And I was healthy.
And see, that's to your point, and I believe you mentioned this to me. This man is a well of knowledge. When we talk about health and we talk about science, especially when COVID came out, a lot of information.
They're very nice.
No, but honest, a lot of information I was able to obtain because, again, with Kina having lupus, it was a concern for us as a family because three of my daughters are essential workers.
Right.
They're in contact with the public more often than my wife and I. The chances of them getting COVID, especially going into the fall and winter, is very high.
It's very high, yes.
I think where a lot of people are kind of confused with the whole COVID thing versus the flu, because a lot of people are like, well, what are the symptoms difference between having the flu and COVID? I think what they should be asking themselves, what is the potential of survival if I have the flu and then catch COVID?
Yes, we don't know that just yet, but it's probably not that great. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you have to think about it in terms, because the flu already kills, 68,000 people a year?
Right, exactly.
On average.
Exactly.
And so now you're adding to that COVID. And so that when it first came out, everybody was like, oh, it's the flu, it's the flu, it's the flu.
Right.
And it's much more than that, because it's a novel coronavirus.
Right.
And so, yes, the flu is a coronavirus. Yes, the cold virus is a coronavirus as well. But this is a novel. And when somebody says novel, it means it's new. It's never been. Our immune systems have never seen this before. And so we'll recover, of course, because now that it's been introduced to our immune systems, and the generations that come behind us, they'll have that innate immunity to COVID, so it won't be as deadly to them. But for us, this is a brand new organism, brand new virus that's never been seen before. And so our immune systems are trying to figure this thing out. Like, wait a minute, where did this come from?
Right. So, and I had an epiphany when you mentioned this to me. The difference between Corona and COVID, and why they stopped calling it Corona and they started calling it COVID-19. If you can kind of give them a little history on that.
Well, the thing is, traditionally, what cold and flu viruses just be called coronavirus, right? But what was happening was people weren't taking COVID actually seriously, because they're like, oh, it's just coronavirus, right? Just like in the bird flu,
right?
The swine flu, and all those different things, right? But what they weren't realizing is that no, yes, it's a coronavirus, but it's novel. It's brand
never seen
new.
Before.
It's brand new, never been introduced into the human biosphere at all. And so it's brand new. We've never seen it.
Right.
We don't know how it'll react. We don't have any type of data behind it. We have things that are similar to it, but we don't have it. We've never dealt with this before. And so when you've never ever dealt with an organism before, you have to be incredibly cautious, because you don't know what's going to happen. It could be nothing, or it could be everything. As you see now, it became everything.
Everything, yeah. And that explains, a lot of people were, oh, Corona's always been around. They had a Garbage Pail Kid, Corona, I forgot the Corona,
right?
And everybody thought, oh, it's always been here. So, fact check, everyone. Corona's been around, in different forms.
Absolutely.
However, what we're seeing now is a whole new strand of this. So that's why they're giving it the name COVID-19.
Right. To make it more technical.
Right. And to separate it from what we typically see or call a form of corona.
Absolutely.
Wow. Dang, that's crazy. So I was talking with someone the other day, and they were like, you know what, we're fine. We're going to be fine. Most of us will survive this. I don't think people are really dying from COVID. And I'm not going to lie, at first, I was a little confused, and I was kind of like, and then my grandmother passed away from COVID.
You know what? Funny enough, my sister's mother-in-law passed away from COVID too. Now the thing was, she was we think she passed away. I can't say they didn't test her, but back in March, when this first started, she passed away. She was terminally ill. She had cancer, and so she had decided not to do any of the treatments or anything like that. And so the doctors told her she had 3 to 6 months. She died in 3 weeks.
Oh wow!
So it's kind of like, and so another thing that why the numbers aren't as accurate is because they're not really testing all the dead for coronavirus. So they're saying, oh, he died of a heart attack, but he could have had coronavirus too, but they just not. But the thing is, the healthcare workers are so overwhelmed they can't.
They don't have.
There's just not enough coroners. It's just not enough testing. Everything right now is just kind of overwhelmed. And so to go back to your point about Kaiser, and they tell you to stay home, the reason they do that is because they don't want to hospitalize you, right? Because the hospital, they don't want to pull you into the hospital environment, which is, of course, filled with sick people, right?
Right.
So you come into the hospital, you're sick, and now you're going to make everybody else here sick. So it's better that you quarantine until you have really severe symptoms where you need to be hospitalized, because then they can treat you in a different type of protocol.
Right.
But if you're just walking into a doctor's office and you're infected with coronavirus, you could potentially affect all these essential healthcare workers, and then that hospital can just go down.
No, that's so true. And it's funny you mentioned that too, because I was talking with, I was watching D.L. Hewley. He was talking about his experience. He was asymptomatic.
That's right. He passed out on stage. That's right.
Passed out on stage, and he said when he went and had tested, they said, "Oh, and by the way, you have COVID, and you have this rare condition where the heart pumps a little different."
Okay. Yes. So I'm glad you brought that up. Heart arrhythmia. So
yes,
even if you're asymptomatic, you still can have damage to your heart. And actually, I won't mention what happened with that, but they've been they found that is a long-term goal, and why that's really dangerous is because America, just us generally, heart disease is like the number 2 killer, either number 1 or number 2. I don't have the statistic right in my head. So if COVID is causing heart problems, and we're already have a heart disease problem within this country, both with men and women, how do you think that's going to help with mortality?
Yeah, it's going to definitely increase it, especially if it's impacting the heart. And one thing he stated is he went in for, he thought, dehydration. And he admitted it. He said, you know what, I was around a whole bunch of people. I was trying to make this money. I wasn't concerned. As a matter of fact, there was an award show in LA. And I believe a lot of people were exposed there.
Right.
And it's that simple. Being within, like, again, we are without masks, but before this, we were fully masked up within, you know, and we decided to create the distance. The importance of being able to give you guys a perspective from someone that's in the field that can tell it from their perspective, I think is very important. Because for me, I could talk about it all day, even if I have a conversation with you, T, and I come back and tell you guys I'm paraphrasing. Whereas you can clarify some of the things that I'm saying that's more theory based.
Right. But no, I mean, if you like, right now I'm working a detail at work. I can't say where I work, but I'm working a detail.
Right.
But we are like PPE down. Like, we don't just have like gloves and gowns. We have face masks, and we also have face shields, because what that does is not only does the face mask protect my coworkers, but the face shield protects me.
Got it.
And so those two in conjunction together greatly decrease the chances of anybody catching COVID. We also do the 6 feet social distancing at work as well, and we always try to make sure that we're looking out for our colleagues, because if they go down, then that's going to make it harder on everybody else. And we are essential workers, and we provide essential services to the American people, and we want to continue to do that. And so the only way we can do that is if we protect each other.
And do it efficiently, because if one person falls out of that link, because it's like a chain link, any chink in that link or that armor can impact how you guys maneuver.
Absolutely.
Now, I wanted to touch on, because it's funny you mentioned the face shield and the mask. So I see a lot of people that wear just the shield. And the thought process in my head is, okay, you're breathing in this air in public. The mask is just protecting in your face, but when you're breathing in and out, those same particles can still come right under that
So
shield.
if you're going to wear the face shield, you should wear a mask as well, right?
Do you guys hear this? Do you guys hear this? So all of y'all walking around with these shields, no mask, and you really think that you're protecting yourself, you're kind of still exposing yourself to the risk of catching it.
Yeah, it's not. The face shield reduces it, but a mask can help reduce it even greater.
Right.
What is it to gain the world and lose your soul? When your petrified lies can't get you to your goal. Frontin' for the masses, need to get your ass kicked. Vision blurred lines, need to view it through some glasses. Schedule an appointment for a spot on Lens Crafters. Digital, brother, don't nobody want your masters. Silverback of Monsoon and Gorilla, the classics. Many y'all said taking notes like in classes. Ask if able to jab and to know what's after your spot. You're a knockin', don't take care of your bastards. Actors, acting like they preach it at a pastor. Trying to build a foundation made of sandcastles. Label me an asshole, better yet a blacksmith. Pitbull off the collar, bigger than a mastiff. Y'all frozen mastiff, let it go and practice. Give it all you got instead of playing with the craft shit. Many thought the backslide, brown nose and backside. Want a slice of dad's pie? You can get the bagpipes. Now you're looking mad like I'm the main source. You a grown ass person looking out the front door.